This is the official EFL Podcast.
Hello and welcome again to the preview show. And with it being the FA Cup this weekend, the focus is on the Sky Bet Championship again. Joining me to look ahead to the action are Sky Sports Don Goodman, Leyton Orient captain Jobi McAnuff and former Birmingham and Cardiff centre-back Roger Johnson. Don, first let's get some reaction from the midweek games though. We saw both West Brom and Leeds winning again. Do you feel that these two have proved to the rest of the league now that they are the teams to beat?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said it over and over and over again. West Bromwich Albion, Leeds United and Fulham, they are the benchmark at this level. Fulham have been a little bit more inconsistent than the other two. In fact, the other two, we always look at the teams at the top. If you want to shoot for automatic promotion, can you average 2 points a game? Well, there's only West Bromwich Albion and Leeds United doing that at the moment. So Fulham have given them a little bit of a start, but they're the only ones that I look at that I feel perhaps have the quality and potential to go on a run, as they did a couple of seasons ago, actually, when the other side of Christmas, they went on this most incredible run and almost nicked a top two spot. So, they are the three benchmark, but West Brom and Leeds are looking pretty good at the moment for me.
Yeah, Jobi, how impressive was it what West Brom did, though, in particular in midweek? Having seen Leeds win the night before, to go on and then reply like they did against a good Bristol City side, that must have been impressive to you.
Yeah, most definitely. I think, every now and again, you put on a performance and get a result that puts a real statement out across the league. And I think that certainly did that for West Brom, against a real good Bristol City team that have been very, very difficult to beat this season. So, to go and, again, dominate really the vast majority of the game as they did and, win very, very comfortably in the end, sends out a huge statement and I think shows the gap between, as Don pointed out earlier, those top two for me who are by far and away the best two. And even that chasing pack, you're only looking at down to sort of 6th, 7th place there, but there is already a gap developing there and I think it showed on the night.
We'll talk more about the top two later on in the show, but Roger, two of your former clubs came up against each other in Sheffield Wednesday and Birmingham City. Obviously, we've seen the animosity between Gary Monk and Pep Clotet in midweek. Would that have helped inspire the Birmingham players to take a point at Hillsborough, though, do you think?
Yeah, I'd have said so. I mean, it's a shame when things like this happens. It's normally players having the spats. But yeah, that would 100% built me up. If I was playing in that game and I got around the lads, obviously that's their manager now. Monk was their old manager now. So yeah, I think it would have given them a bit more about them on the night to go and get a result and back their manager. I'm sure. I mean, Monk has a good reputation. He seems from his interviews and how he is as a person, as a cool guy. I don't know if he keeps in touch with the other players, but they've got to go back their manager. So yeah, looking at that. And every player would have seen it. I mean, everybody's seen it. And it's not a great situation, but as far as a player would view that, as far as I would view that, I would get right behind my manager. So, yeah, it's probably made them think, right, that's happened, that's gone on before the game. And they've gone into the game with a mindset of thinking, right, let's back our manager and give him a good performance.
Don, Luton ended a run of 5 defeats on the bounce, beating Charlton as well. How much did Graham Jones need that result, especially after being beaten by Leeds last weekend, after what seemed a good performance?
Yeah, I don't think that they've possibly had the results that they've maybe deserved, Luton. I don't think there's been an awful lot wrong with them, but when you lose into a last-minute own goal against the best team in the league in Leeds and you're conceding an 82nd minute goal, which means you lose. I think it was against Birmingham a couple of games earlier. It's easy to start feeling a little bit sorry for yourself when you're in that predicament. So the win against Charlton the other night was absolutely massive. They've got to utilise that. They've got to use that as a little bit of a springboard and a little bit of a catalyst, because it is hotting up down at the bottom, isn't it? What with Stoke's new appointment, picking up a couple of results. Wigan at home are particularly good. Middlesbrough got a big win the other night, and the Cowley brothers have revolutionised Huddersfield, haven't they? So, Luton, it was a big 3 points, and it's something that they are going to have to try and build on.
Jobi, we saw Neil Harris as well get the first win for him as Cardiff boss as well. How important has it been for him to get the fans on side there? Of course, one of your former clubs.
Yeah, I think, going in there to what were kind of mixed reviews really from some sections of the fans, over his appointment. I think it'd been really, really key for him to get some points on the board really quickly. And, having come back from 2-0 down in the previous game against Charlton, I thought that showed a real good intent from their players and clearly got a response, at half time, and they went out and got that result and got a point, which they took into the game, obviously, against Stoke, and a really hard-fought win. But I think that will please him, listening and reading to his comments. 2 different performances. He said they're very open in the game against Charlton, but a lot more compact and organised. And, in terms of what he brings, I think it'll be a lot more of that to Cardiff, really hard to beat. And I think, 4 points from 2 games is a real good start for him and something to build on as they look to push up the table.
Roger, just a quick word on League One as well. Huge match midweek, Ipswich and Wycombe. It ended in a draw. How important a result, though, could that be for Gareth Ainsworth going forward?
Massively, yeah. It's a massive result for him. I mean, it sounded like a blinder of a game. I think 11 players got booked, which is quite unusual. But
that's how we judge blinders of games now, innit? Bookings. Old school.
Bookings. Wycombe will feel a bit aggrieved that they had the chance to win the game in missing a penalty, but it was a mad game. But certainly going there and getting a point, that's huge, because Wycombe, let's be honest, are probably overachieving, and no one probably had them up there to be anywhere near the sort of top 6. But we've said it in previous podcasts that he's done a hell of a job there. He knows the club inside out, been there a long time. The players respect him. He's getting the best out of the players. So, yeah, going there, because Ipswich are probably the favourites to go up. So, yeah, huge result for both clubs as well, because Ipswich will want to stay tight. They've got 2 games in hand. And obviously, if they win them, then they find themselves top. So I think for both clubs, it was a good point. As long as you're not losing against them sides that are sort of one below you or one above you, they're good results.
Yeah, Wycombe, as you say, 5 points clear, though Ipswich have those 2 games in hand, as you've mentioned. Don, let's move on to the previews now, and Friday's match at the Liberty Stadium between Swansea and Fulham. We know how good Swansea's away record is, of course, but how important is it that they start to perform at home now as well if they are going to mount a promotion challenge?
Yeah, I mean, it is important, really. And, whatever club you are at whatever level and whatever your aspirations are, home form is usually massive in order that you build towards achieving your goals, really. So the only team not to lose away in the country, which is a fantastic achievement. It really, really is. But they've already lost four home games, which is a little bit concerning and something that is going to have to change. Look, they're sitting in 6th place at the moment. Do I honestly believe that Steve Cooper's remit was to get Swansea City promoted this season? In answer to that, I would probably think not. I think it was probably a season of consolidation after Graham Potter had left and carrying on that ethos of, shall we call it, the Swansea way, the passing front foot football, which Steve Cooper has got them doing really, really well. But the home form has been a little bit of a concern, and of course, they're up against one of the division's top teams in Fulham. So big game all round.
Yeah, Jobi, no wins in the last 3 as well for Swansea. Could that also maybe be teams figuring them out a little bit as well?
Could be a little bit. I think in a long season as it is, I think they've been, I suppose, a little bit victims of their own success. Their form at the early part of the season was nothing sort of sensational, really. A real, brilliant start to the season, and I think expectations then obviously get raised. They've had a little bit more of an inconsistent period, but the form's not terrible. Obviously, they haven't won in 3, but a couple of draws away from home, which any point on the road in this league is a good point. I think the one real disappointing one of those 3 would have been the result against Millwall. Again, a home game that they've lost, and that's something they really need to address. But they've picked up a couple of wins prior to that. So again, I think they are probably fairly happy with where they are overall, in the playoff positions, and they've given themselves a real good chance to go into that real busy Christmas period and come out of it in a good position come the new year.
Roger, you've talked about how difficult and tight this league is before, as well as Jobi mentions. If Swansea win, they actually leapfrog Fulham into 3rd. If they lose, they go 5 points behind them. How important, I think you touched on this earlier with Wycombe and Ipswich, but how important is it to not concede ground when you're playing one of the teams that are in there and around you?
It's vital. I mean, certainly with the period coming up now over Christmas, you want to keep everybody close around you. You don't want gaps, because I mean, if you get in the result, if you go into the Christmas period and you're 1 point or 1 point ahead, 1 point behind, you're in touching distance of getting into them top 2 spots. If you're going 5 points behind third, then yeah, not ideal. I know it's only halfway through the season, but the league doesn't lie. So they'll be looking to get a result. Obviously, Fulham are on a good run at the moment, winning their last 3. But they're an up and down side. I know Don says it that they are one of the favourites, and yeah, on paper they are. Form hasn't suggested that before the sort of the last week, really. It's a crazy league. When you've got a midweek game, you're Tuesday, Saturday, and then you find yourself there's 9 points there. So they're on the back of a good run. Swansea, like we've said, are on a bit of a bad run, especially being the home side. They need to sort that out. But yeah, it'd be a tight game. I've said it, and you said it just there. The Championship's crazy, so anyone can beat anyone. So if Swansea are at it, I'm going to go for a draw in this one.
Going for a draw. Don, we keep talking about the importance of Fulham's attacking threat, though, which we saw in their win in midweek, that 3-0 win, but only 1 goal conceded as well in the last 3 games. Will that be what's pleasing Scott Parker most at the minute, do you think?
Possibly, but, I still think they look vulnerable defensively. We can say that they've had a couple of clean sheets and only conceded 1 in the last 3, but, from certainly the Queen's Park Rangers game, Queen's Park Rangers could have scored and should have scored 4 or 5 goals. I think it was more by luck than judgment. So that's the biggest difference of all between Fulham and Leeds and West Bromwich Albion. Leeds defensively conceded 10 goals. I know West Bromwich Albion have conceded 1 more goal than Fulham, but it's noticeable over the last sort of 4 games that West Brom have really, really steadied things down defensively, whereas Fulham, although they kept the clean sheet, they've played, obviously Birmingham had chances, but Fulham dug deep and won a game, which you've got to be able to do if you want success. QPR could have scored 4 or 5, and at the moment, Derby, when they go away from Pride Park, it's almost a given that you're going to beat them. So I'm not really going to judge Fulham on that. I think I look at this game, they play Swansea, then after that it's Bristol City, then Preston, then Brentford, then Leeds. That is as tough as it gets, really. I think I'll judge Fulham in about 5 games' time, really, because from what I saw the other evening defensively, there's an awful lot of work to be done.
And a long away trip for Fulham as well, coming up, Jobi, going to Swansea. As a player, how difficult is it having to travel and recover to play in another big game with limited recovery time?
I'll be honest, as a player, I didn't mind it too much. I quite like when you got the Saturday, Tuesday, Saturdays. You're just pretty much recovering in terms of fatigue and how you're feeling. It's amazing what a couple of wins can do, and those knocks suddenly aren't as bad. And again, the tiredness doesn't quite hit you as badly, when you're coming off the back of 2 wins. So, I think the biggest thing for me, when you look through that squad, really, they've got players that have been there, done it in the Championship. Players that have got multiple promotions and certainly have had to deal with things like this before. So I can't see it being a big issue for them. And I don't think it's going to have too much impact on the game when Fulham go to Swansea.
Roger, as we mentioned earlier, Fulham up to 3rd now as well. Jamal Campbell-Rice said last week that he doesn't think that Fulham have actually clicked yet as a team. Don also now thinks that Fulham still need to prove themselves, maybe. Do you think that's the case? Do you think they have clicked, or do you think that they need a few more games to sort of be able to be judged?
I totally mirror what Don said. I would judge them in 5 games' time, because they are very up and down. This last week it looks all rosy now, but there are underlying problems there. The last 7, they won 4, but 3 of them have been in the last week. Lost 2 and drawn 1, but they're a very up and down team. So I'm not going to say that they cracked it yet. Totally agree with what Don said there, and I think we've got to judge them certainly defensively. That's their problem at the moment. But judge them in 4 or 5 games' time, just to see if they have. I hope they have, but I'm not convinced just yet.
Well, Swansea have won of the last 6 home Championship games, so based on that, win against Fulham sounds like maybe a tough ask for them. Don, let's move on to the big match at Ellen Road now as we take a look at Leeds against Middlesbrough. We started the podcast by talking about Leeds, of course. So they seem to be grounding out results now more recently, as opposed to maybe just dominating games previously and not getting the points. So we know Bielsa values how his side plays, of course, but is being able to grind out more wins the most important thing?
Well, it's one of the most important things because you can't play well in every game over 46 games. So therefore, you have to be able to dig deep and grind results out when you're not quite at your best. And, certainly over the last few games, Leeds have been able to do that. A couple of late goals in the last two have proved really decisive. They've just won 4 in a row now. And, all of a sudden there is that little gap between themselves and third place Fulham. So, I think Marcelo Bielsa will be pleased that his team will keep going till the 90 whatever minute, and they will always try and win games, and they'll always try and do it in an attacking front foot kind of a way. And every now and again where they do dip below those heady heights of performance levels, they have proved that they are capable of getting a positive result. So as I said earlier in the podcast, for me, along with West Bromwich Albion, so far they have been the standout team.
There's been talk this week of Calvin Phillips and that he should maybe be receiving an England call-up. But I think it's fair to say Ben White has been one of the standout players in the Championship so far this season, Jobi. Should Gareth Southgate maybe looking at him more closely as well?
Yeah, I'll be absolutely amazed if he's not at least on the radar. I think with the way Gareth Southgate wants England to play now and the fact that he's massive on bringing the younger players through, I'm absolutely certain that he will be keeping tabs on him. It's a good group of young centre-halves we've got at the moment for England, and I think for me the big test is that next step up. He's clearly come into a real tough environment, to play for such a big club under the pressure that they're under and perform as well as he's done this year. He's played every game, the best defensive record in the league. He shows a maturity way beyond his 22 years and so much composure on the ball. He steps out into midfield to overload that area sometimes when teams sit back against them. And for me, I think he's got a massive future. Again, once this season's done, whatever happens, he'll be hoping obviously Leeds get promoted. There is an option, of course, for him to recalled to his parent club at Brighton, and I'd love to see him in the Premier League at some point, and I'm sure he'll acquit himself really well. When he does, I think that's when you're going to be really looking at the England shout.
Roger, being a former centre-half, how much has he impressed you as well?
He has. It's good to see. And certainly in the Championship, I've said it over and over, it's a hard place to learn your trade. Normally you'd go out and probably get some games in League One. I mean, he's played a lot of games, but he has impressed me. He's comfortable. Like Jobi said, can step out. Certainly the way the England manager wants to play. I second what Jobi says, bright future ahead of him. And again, I'd like to see him in the Premier League, and that's the next level. But certainly for him personally, just keep doing what he's doing. He's doing great. The league, the stats doesn't lie. They've got the best defensive record in the league, only conceding 10 goals. As I said, I'd like to see him in the Premier League, and hopefully, if that's with Leeds or Brighton, it'd be good.
Certainly had big shoes to fill as well with Pontus Jansson leaving in the summer. Focusing on the visitors now, though, Don, you covered their game last weekend against Hull. Marvin Johnson's red card obviously changed that game, but how impressed were you before that happened? They didn't look like a team who were in a relegation battle, did they?
No, they certainly didn't, and it has been the Riverside. It's been a very, very difficult place, to play for the home players over the last season a bit, really, I guess, stretching back. And, they haven't had a brilliant home record in that period. So to go into a game like that at home against Hull, to put on a show, and they were excellent, I have to say. The first 37 minutes until that red card, there really was only going to be one team that won that game, and then it all changed in a flash. But what impressed me most, really, if I'm honest with you, was the mobility and the threat that Assombalonga and Ashley Fletcher, they were a real threat and a constant menace. Obviously, Ashley Fletcher had to go off at half-time, but he got the winning goal the other night in a big game against Barnsley. So I think we'll maybe start to see the best of Ashley Fletcher. Assombalonga has been amongst the goals as well. So, if you're talking about them two offering a danger to Leeds United, then maybe they will. But Borough are going to have to be They're going to have to be at it. They're going to have to be organised, and they're going to have to put on a really solid defensive display if they're going to compete. But they were very, very impressive against Hull and carried that forward the other night in very difficult conditions.
Jobi, and they had that crucial win, as Don says, against Barnsley in midweek. How much of a confidence boost will that have given them? A must-win for them, of course, down there in that relegation fight.
Yeah, you can't beat the feeling of getting 3 points. I think particularly when it had been so long, 10 games without a win, going back over 2 months, the confidence just gradually starts ebbing out of players. And although they've had some decent performances, you can't keep coming out saying that, when you're not winning games. So I think for Jonathan Woodgate, it's a big shot in the arm for everyone at the football club. And like Don said, I think with the 2 boys they've got up front now, goal scoring for them has been a real issue this year. Real disappointing in that aspect of the game. And I think if they can start clicking as they have done in recent weeks and start adding a few goals to that, what the generally have been decent performances, hopefully they can start picking up some better results than they've had recently.
Jonathan Woodgate coming back to where he made his name as well, of course, Roger. Do you think inside he'll have a point to prove at Ellen Road?
Of course he will. He's an ex-player, and his mindset won't be too different to how he was as a player. He's got pride. He'll want to win. Yeah, I mean, he was a legend and deservedly so at Leeds. But he's Borough manager now, so he will want to go there and prove a point, especially how Leeds are going. But yeah, I mean, he seems, I don't know him personally, but he seems a sort of guy to pride himself on what he does. He certainly did that as a player. So I'm sure he's installing that to the boys at Borough, and he'll want to go and cause an upset.
Well, Middlesbrough actually have the lowest shot conversion rate in the Championship this season so far, so they'll be hoping they can take their chances at Ellen Road this weekend. A few teams have found chances at a premium against Leeds in the past. Moving on now, though, to Monday night's match, Don, and last week this would have been first v second, but 2 defeats on the bounce since then for Preston, who take on West Brom at Deepdale. Alex Neil seems to be blaming injuries for that. Is that lack of depth, though, something he has to be concerned about?
Well, it's only a couple of weeks ago when things were going well that we were saying that they actually have more depth. And that's one of the reasons that they are going so well this season. They've got more depth than they had last season. So it'd be a little bit hypocritical of me to turn around and use that as a reason, really. They were always going to come into a situation where, they didn't quite manage to get over the line. And it's the first time all season they've had back-to-back defeats. And so when that happens to you as a group of players and as an individual and as a coach, you have to have a response. The fact that they are playing top of the table, West Bromwich Albion, is a real challenge for Preston. But they're playing them at Deepdale. Their home form has been fantastic. They're unbeaten there all season. And you've got to look at the positives. And that's it. They've got the best home record in the league, and they will, despite back-to-back defeats, they will fancy their chances of beating West Bromwich Albion.
Jobi, but a 4-0 defeat as well at Hull though in midweek. It's tough enough, obviously, coming against the league leaders, but for Alex Neil, it is, like as Don says, is it all about the reaction, the performance in this one? Because it's obviously not very easy to get a win against West Brom at the minute.
It's not, but it's got to be something they're targeting. I'm sure they will. They've had a great start to the season, and Don said they've got a brilliant record at home. And I think for me, again, as a player, when I've had a particularly bad night at the office, as they did, against Hull, you want to put that right as quickly as you can. And again, that for me is why I enjoyed, the Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday games, because such a quick turnaround. You haven't got too long to be moping about. I'm sure they would have had a quick look through, what they didn't do well enough, but the focus will very much be on this game. And, for the lads there to go to, obviously play against West Brom at home, there's no better game to get yourself back on track. So I'm sure it's one they're really looking forward to. And, they'll go into it with no fear, I'm sure.
Roger, as I said previously, it's difficult to expect a result maybe against one of the top teams in the division in West Brom. But how important is it that they don't lose this game and begin a habit of losing after losing back-to-back games?
Yeah, I mean, it's a horrible situation when you find yourself in it. The longer you go without a win, the more you start overthinking the problem. They've been great this season, so it's certainly not a panic stage. They picked up a couple of bad results. The league is so difficult. Yeah, they've got West Brom on the weekend. I'm not sure they're up and coming fixtures, but every game in the league is, you don't go into it thinking, yeah, we'll win this. It's a really, really hard league. So what they'll want to do is have a good performance, get that one out of the way. I'm like Jobi, when you've got a Tuesday, Saturday, it's brilliant. I used to love it, just because if you have had a bad night like that at the office, they'll push that to one side. They've got an opportunity now to go and play top of the league, put on a performance, and there's no reason why they can't go and get a result. You don't turn into a bad side overnight. Just get back to the basics of what they were doing, and it could go either way. The quicker you stop the losing rut, the better.
Don, conversely, your former team, West Brom, are in a winning habit. How important is it that they stay in that as long as possible, especially with it being, towards that Christmas period, as we've mentioned now, where the games are coming thick and fast?
Yeah, it's just the best habit in football, isn't it? Winning games of football. And they're certainly in that. And if they don't win, they don't tend to lose. They've only lost one game the whole season, and that was at Ellen Road. And actually, in that game, they probably were the better team. So, Slaven has gone in there. He's got everything the way that he wants it very, very quickly. He's got them organised, because there's plenty of new players within that team. And although, as I said earlier on in the season, they were conceding probably too many goals for his liking, but they were always one step ahead of the game in that they carry such a goal scoring threat from so many different areas. So for me, they're looking more like the full package now. Defensively, they're keeping clean sheets. They look very, very strong as a unit defensively. And again, that's one of the three things I say. If you're going to get promoted automatically, you need a strong defence, I think. Also think you need strong home form. And you also, as we alluded to, need to be able to win games of football when you're not quite at your best. And, at the moment, West Bromwich Albion, for me, they're ticking all of those boxes and looking good.
Jobi, in his post-match press conference, Slaven Bilic as well talked about the importance of Grady Diangana, that he stays at West Brom throughout the season as well for his own development. But how damaging could it be for West Brom if West Ham do recall him in January? He's been a revelation, obviously.
Yeah, he has. He's been, a real key part of that front four, really. And I think along with Matt Phillips and Costa Pereira, they've really been a potent attacking force as we saw the other night. So, it's one for me as a young player. I like seeing players out developing, and I think it's the best way to learn, being out and performing and having to perform week after week. Clearly everything that's going on at West Ham at the moment, they might be tempted to bring him back, but I'd only like to see him go back if he was going to play. So for me, if he's not going to be back and playing regularly there, I'd certainly like to see him stay at West Brom, and I think they would be very, very disappointed to lose him at this stage of the season. I think it would be a real big miss and a huge hole to fill if he did get called back. So, I'm sure they're praying that, West Ham let him stay.
They had the same problem last season, didn't they, when Harvey Barnes was recalled to Leicester, yeah. And he was... Now, that really, really hurt West Bromwich Albion. And it would hurt West Bromwich Albion if the West Ham recalled Grady Diangana, but they do have more cover, whereas they had none. Kyle Edwards is a terrific young talent, for just for instance, so although it's the last thing they want to happen, I do think that they're more equipped to deal with it this season than they were with the loss of Harvey Barnes last season.
Roger, we talked as well about Ben White earlier in the show, being a linchpin in that Leeds team, but how important is it for these young players who are out on loan in the Championship, who are getting their chance to prove themselves week in, week out in a league as fierce as this?
Yeah, I've said it on other podcasts. It's great to see. It is tough to get in a Premier League side because obviously you have to go with a tad of experience, and normally there's a lot of money spent on bringing people in from elsewhere. So it is tough as a kid. So the next best possible thing is the Championship, because it's an amazing league. I used to love it, and I've said over and over and over, it's hard. So to go out and get that experience at that age, it's priceless.
Well, looking at the game itself, though, Preston have scored 14 goals from set pieces in the Championship this season, including 4 of the last 6, more than any other side in the division. So let's hope for them that they get plenty of corners in this one. Guys, thanks for your time this week and have a great weekend.
Always a pleasure. Cheers, guys.
No worries.
The official EFL Podcast the best reaction to all the match action, available every week.